France has spoken. The old president is also the new one. Emmanuel Macron's victory over Marine Le Pen gives him a second mandate for change, or will it be more of the same? Hello and welcome to our post-election debate from the European Parliament in Brussels, the heart of democracy in Europe. Thank you for joining us here. I'm Stefan Grobe from Euronews.
And I'm Caroline Will from Debating Europe, the online citizens debating platform.
Emmanuel Macron now faces myriad challenges, ranging from Russia's invasion of Ukraine to the future of the EU. But perhaps most important, Macron will preside over an increasingly divided country in which many of his voters are disillusioned and uninspired. The election has left the traditional political landscape in France in shambles and dramatically strengthened the political extremes.
After all, never before in Europe's second biggest economy has the far right been closer to taking over the country. In her third attempt, Marine Le Pen scored more than 40%, a warning to the political establishment everywhere that right-wing populism is still a force to reckon with. And nobody knows this better than Emmanuel Macron. Take a look.
Merci.
Victory for Emmanuel Macron. And with almost 59% of the vote, his winning margin was smaller than 5 years ago, but still bigger than initially predicted. In an already worrying sign that his next term will be complicated, more than a quarter of the French electorate refused to vote for either him or Marine Le Pen. In Macron's victory speech, sensing that he needs to soften his stance somewhat, he reached out to all those who rejected him for various reasons.
Et je sais que pour nombre de nos compatriotes qui ont choisi aujourd'hui l'extrême droite, la colère et les désaccords qui les ont conduits à voter pour ce projet doivent aussi trouver une réponse.
In that same speech, Macron spoke about a victory for a more independent France and stronger Europe, but avoided any policy specifics for his agenda going forward. And Marine Le Pen, in her concession speech, the far-right leader said she will continue to keep up the fight against Emmanuel Macron.
Je crains ce soir que le quinquennat qui s'ouvre ne rompra pas avec les pratiques méprisantes et brutales du précédent et qu'Emmanuel Macron ne fera rien pour réparer les fractures qui divisent notre pays et font souffrir nos compatriotes.
So the battle lines for the next political fight in France are already drawn. Macron and Le Pen must now once again mobilize their voters when the country elects its representatives to the National Assembly in June. Only then will we know whether Macron's latest victory will translate into real political power.
So Europe will have to keep its eyes on France for a while, because whatever happens there will have a huge impact on the rest of the European Union. We want to discuss all this with our panel, MEPs who know France, who know the EU, and who know a thing or two about the power of elections. And with that, I'd like to welcome Véronique Trillet-Lenoir from France, Renew Europe. From Poland, Witold Waszczykowski from the ECR Group. From Germany, Dilara Burkhardt, Social Democrat. From Greece, Petros Kokkalis from the left. And last but not least, from Italy, Marco Campomenosi from Identity and Democracy. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here today. We're going to cover as many bases as possible, and we'll bring in questions from young viewers as well, because we wanted to know what people are thinking and what their concerns are. And with that, I'd like to do a quick round first, and let me start with you, Véronique Trillet-Lenoir. You are from Macron's party, obviously a big win. Is there a win that many people expected? Is there anything that was remarkable and still surprising in this victory?
Thank you. Yes, it is a clear win. The main feeling, I would say, is relief. And it's shared in France, where the majority of voters, not all, but the majority of voters intended to avoid the far-right danger. It is clearly a relief here in the European Union, and we've heard that from many European leaders, and it's obvious here in the European Parliament. And it's also a relief beyond France and Europe in many countries, including, for instance, Ukraine, where Marine Le Pen at the French government would have been a terrible threat since she's working hand in hand with Vladimir Putin.
All right. Witold Waszczykowski, you're a former foreign affairs minister. How do you see the election? Was there ever a moment when you doubted this outcome?
No, unfortunately not, because we were hoping for some changes, although we were not expecting positive changes also from Marine Le Pen either. But I would say that the first term of President Macron was not beneficial from our perspective. 5 years ago, he promised to fight against the Polish interest. He promised to fight to keep investment in France, not to allow them to go to Poland, and he did it for 5 years. Let me remind you also that France is a part of Normandy formula, a Minsk peace process, which is a very important instrument to deal with the Russian imperialism. Well, nothing happened. I think that was a disgrace period for him, because from one side he was he was pretending to making a peace with Russia, and on the other side he was selling weapons to Russia, which is used right now against Ukraine. So I don't expect in the next term any added value for Europe, and especially for our part of Europe.
Dilara Burkhardt, unlike in Germany, there was no revival of the socialists in France. Do you see Macron today as an ally or an opponent?
And more than an ally, because I mean, we have seen the big threat of a right-wing president of France, which would have been the worst thing that could happen right now for Europe, as we know that right now the unity of Europe is crucial, and this is what we need to do. And of course, Macron is an ally to that sense, but of course also he is no social democrat. And I mean, the big division we are seeing in France now, it's a proof of that, because we see that a lot of, especially young people, don't see perspectives right now in the country when it comes to the social injustices we are seeing. And I think the division that we saw in this election night is a big task for the next presidency of Emmanuel Macron. He has to bring back together the country, and the parliamentary elections for that in June will be an important step for that.
Petros Kokalis, representing the left in the European Parliament. There is now in France, thanks to Mélenchon, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, a sizable left-leaning group of voters. Many of them refused to vote for Macron in the second round. Was that playing with fire?
I think it was a very hard decision for the voters of France Insoumis to choose between two very different but two equally unwelcome for them choices. But in fact, they were effectively the democratic counterweight to Marine Le Pen. And if it was not for the bulk of the Mélenchon voters that went to the polls and voted for François Macron, we would have had a very different France and Europe today. So I think that going forward towards the parliamentary elections, it is the time for the French left, the French progressive alliance, let's say, progressive caucus, to rebirth a French invention of the interwar, the Popular Front, and provide a serious counterweight to the policies of François Macron in the past 5 years, so that she can do the things that Dilara said that she needs to do.
All right, Marco Campomenosi, you represent identity and democracy in the European Parliament, close to Marine Le Pen. It was her third defeat in a presidential election. How do you explain these losses, and how much does she need? How many times does she need to run before she can win?
Yeah, It's a defeat, but it's anyway a great success because she has improved. She has taken many votes. She has made a lot of differentiations from the so-called extreme right, because I hear mentioning extreme right, but the political platform of Marine Le Pen is not anymore an extreme rightist one. And the French system should take in consideration her proposals, because even if next time could be the right one for her to win, it will be maybe too late, because these fractions, these divisions inside the country, which are very similar to the ones which are happening in my country. My party, Lega, is taking votes from the working class or former working class. We are taking votes from the firma owners, which are afraid regarding some decisions that even Brussels is taking in consideration. And one of the responsibilities of Macron will be also to take a final decision if we will be a leftist or center-rightist political movement, and, for example, what to do regarding these Fit for 55 proposals on which we as MEPs are working here in the European Parliament, and for which, in my opinion, there will be a strong risk of losing competitiveness for the future. The war in Ukraine will create big problems to our economy, the question of energy. There is a big absent in our debate at the moment, a member of EPP, because the German EPP party has a big responsibility in what has happened in our dependency from Russian sources of energy and so on. So I think there has been made mistakes in the last years, and the French system, but also in the other countries, should take in consideration the proposals of Marine, because the division we have at social problem, the map of the departments in France is very clear regarding this.
All right. So the vote for Macron was not a vote of passion, but a vote of reason, a weaker one than 5 years ago. He said he wants to reach out to those who didn't vote for him. What conclusions is he about to draw from this, and how will it affect Europe? Will we see a softer Macron, and where? And Véronique Trillet-Lenoir, the question goes to you. Will we see a softer Macron going forward, because he needs to reach out to more different people?
I don't know if we will see a softer Macron, but definitely we will see a different one. There are lessons to be drawn from this election. The first one is that many people in France, about 1 out of 4 people, do not vote. And abstention is really a crucial question, especially because it is the young generation who abstains voting. Another lesson to be drawn, and it has probably a link, is that environment was not enough addressed during the previous 5 years, mainly because of the 2 successive crises, the sanitary crisis first, and then the war crisis. And this is an ambition that the President of France and the President of the European Council is leading. We also, when I look at my citizens, it is clear to me that altogether we have a huge responsibility to show the citizens what Europe brings to them, and to show them what they bring to Europe. It was definitely in my country a gap between what we see here from France and Macron and what the French people feel, which is that Europe is so far away from their day-to-day problems. And here we really have a huge responsibility to show them that a sovereign Europe is made for them, and this will probably be improved.
I want to give the same question to Dilara Burkhardt. Macron, your ally from now on. Do you expect a softer approach, a softer side of his going forward?
I want him to be more precise and more acting than having nice words. This is what I always combine with Macron. Beautiful speeches, big announcements, but then when it comes about delivering to them, he did not. Especially when you addressed the environmental question. We have already an environmental minister of his own cabinet resigning because he was not delivering too much. So this is where we have to, also as progressives in the European Parliament, look at what he's delivering now in the last months of the presidency, but also after that. Will he be a partner for the Green Deal? Because this is what I read also within the election result we see. It's a vote in favor of the Green Deal. French people want the climate action to happen. They want to be part of this transition. And it's about giving chances to people and not postponing the necessary things to one day where they will happen and then even create bigger social injustices. So it's now about delivering on how a social and just and sustainable transition will be made in Europe. And this is not only about words, about far away distances, goals in the distance, but it's about acting now, and this is what I will measure him and his words.
All right, Macron's victory was overwhelming, larger than most presidential elections in France in the past, but how big is his mandate in reality? I'd like to bring in Caroline now, who has some interesting numbers for us, who tell us about the behavior of the voters and those who didn't vote. Caroline.
Thank you, Stefan. So in his victory speech, Emmanuel Macron promised to unite France and to be a president for all. But if you take a look at the numbers, that might not actually be an easy task. To recap, over 18 million French people voted for Emmanuel Macron, giving him a share of 58.5% of all casted votes and a comfortable lead over his opponent Marine Le Pen, who received 13.3 million votes or 41.5% of the casted votes. But if he truly wants to become the president for all, he not only needs to convince the Le Pen supporters, but also those eligible 13.6 million French voters who actually decided to abstain from voting and did not cast a vote at all. And this year's voter turnout was at just under 72%, actually making it the lowest in a presidential runoff in over 50 years. And as you can see, the group of abstained voters is actually even slightly larger than the group of people who voted for Marine Le Pen. So what does this mean for Macron's support in the French population? And what does he need to do to truly become a president for all? And on this note, we reached out to our Debating Europe community of young Europeans and asked them to send us their questions on the French election results. Let's listen to this question from Lena from Germany.
Hello, my name is Lena, and I'm wondering, although Marine Le Pen lost the election, she still received over 40% of the votes, which is her best result yet. So how far right-wing is the French population really, and will her success inspire other populists or nationalists across Europe?
Right, Marco Campomenosi, how significant is this result for Marine Le Pen, for the rest of Europe?
Well, I think it's important because it shows that the French voters decided by themselves. They did not take care about what someone told them regarding the fact that she has to be left in a corner, that her proposals had not to be taken in considerations, and so on. This is one of the reasons for which we have a political group at the European Parliament joining political parties which in the past used to stay in other families, but which are joining their efforts in order to make something different. But of course, the attempt was made with this conference on the future of Europe, but finally it's a meeting where Lega, my party, has sent the biggest numbers of members for the Italian delegation there, but which is failing because they are finally speaking only about a reform on the elections of the MEPs, and even the citizens selected to be represented there, they say, okay, but we thought that we were speaking about how to reform Europe. So this is something to give to the citizens the impression that things could never change, that anyway, okay, Marine has lost, so the status quo may stay and we may continue with the same rules for everything, is a mistake even for the future of Europe itself.
I want to ask Petros Kokalis, Marine Le Pen's result, is this making right-wing populism stronger or weaker in Europe?
Well, I think there is a general trend towards normalization and legalization policies and ideas which were thought extreme in the past. And I think that this is a direct result of 30 years of deregulation, of less state, of privatization, of less public services, of less involvement of citizens. The abstention is also growing as much as the right-wing vote is growing. So I think this is a signal which we need to take at heart. And we need to take also at heart what the citizens of the European Union have said in the Conference of Europe to provide these answers quite fast.
The presidential campaign in France was overshadowed by the war in Ukraine. Emmanuel Macron was one of the Western leaders most active in trying to find a diplomatic solution with Vladimir Putin, who, by the way, congratulated him on his election victory and wished him good health. Now, does that give Macron more clout to lead European diplomatic efforts to bring the conflict to an end? And is this French leadership desirable? And Witold, I want your opinion on this.
First, I would disagree with your opinion that he was most active. Actually, he was...
one of the most active.
He concentrated mostly on his domestic issues. That's natural. He was active calling Putin only. That's not enough. Not enough, at least for two reasons. One of the reasons I mentioned, because France is a part of the Normandy formula. The second reason, France is a president of the European Union in this half of the year. So that at least for these two reasons, he's supposed to be much more active. He's supposed to be already visiting Kyiv and some other areas, not just talking to Putin. This Russian-Ukrainian war is not going to be solved by diplomatic issues, only by defeat of Russia. So we have to help Ukraine right now to defend themselves. This is not Putin's war, and any calls or appeals directly to him will not break this aggression. So right now I expect some reflection after this years and months of the tragedy of lack of progress of Normandy formula, and I will encourage him right now to take a lead. Yes.
Okay. Veronique, I want your opinion on that.
Yes, it's special to hear that he was impeached. He was far away from the Ukrainian and Russian war because of domestic affairs. Because in France, we have heard exactly the opposite. In France, he was accused not to be at the domestic affairs because he was so much involved as the president of the European Council in the international affairs, and especially in this war. So yes, I hope that now that the election is done, he will be free enough to give all the times he wants to give to this problem by going and visit again in Kyiv. And because the far right is not anymore here to say, wait, look, we have to deal with Putin. Ukrainian war is a montage, a film by the Ukrainians. So yes, I hope, like you, that he will have even more time to take care of the international affairs.
I don't know. I don't understand why we are using this negative, stigmatizing words like far right. Marine Le Pen got almost 14 million people support. She is a legitimate democratic member of this French society. So why we are using these expressions?
After all,
of course she
lost.
lost.
I want to move on here and bring in a defense issue. Macron ran on a platform of stronger European defense. What can we expect in terms of European security and transatlantic cooperation? As France still holds the rotating EU presidency, what will French leadership look like now that the election is over? And I want to ask Dilara this question. Germany is very important for France and vice versa. What is your expectation here?
Just one point on that, far right of Marine Le Pen is just a description of where her political positions lie. So you have to name it, and then this is a problem that France also has to tackle, that the positions are having such big majorities, and it's a problem that we have to solve in a sense, and because I don't think that they are all convinced right-wing extremists in that sense. But coming to this, I think for us in Germany, with our new progressive government, the win of Emmanuel Macron was a big vision of hope also for the European cooperation, because we know in the past that when there is a big France-German motor in driving European integration, a lot of things are possible, and this wouldn't have been possible if we have a right-wing president in the presidency in France. This would have been a problem for the unity we need now as Europeans, and especially when it comes to the sense of Ukraine. And I think it's not about some country leading the efforts, it's about what we have shown in the last weeks, that the West, that the US, that the EU, that we all united in our approach about supporting and standing at the side of Ukraine, supporting with humanitarian aid, supporting with weapon deliveries. This is what we have proven in the last week, and the good news from this election is that this will continue now, and that we still can be united in the solidarity with Ukraine, in defeating Russian aggression.
And Marco, your thoughts on this?
I think that the European Commission should stop to divide us, because what has been good in these weeks after the aggression of Ukraine is that we have shown us more united. We have all voted for these resolutions attacking Russia, and my party, Lega, is voting for this resolution since the beginning of this term, even for the case of Mr. Navalny and others. I've been in Poland. I've seen how Poland is supporting the people escaping from Ukraine. And if I think, and the same is doing Hungary, for example, but not only, also Romania, but for some of these countries, because their governments were not the same like-minded as the European Commission, whereas we have seen attacks on the rule of law, on other issues, which are finally based on almost nothing, honestly. I think that we should be working on prioritizing for what is really important, and to use, if there is something positive of this very bad experience of the war, to see what is in common between all of us, and to focus on these things, even taking in consideration all the political parties, because even what is happening sometimes in the European Parliament regarding this French word of a cordon sanitaire is quite really undemocratic and not acceptable anymore.
Petros, your Greek perspective on this?
From the Greek perspective, it's a very different situation, because, like Victor, we are on the border of the European Union, not only exposed to ever-increasing refugee flows and migrant flows, but also neighboring towards an aggressive not NATO member. And we believe that the European Union needs to have a stronger and more coherent defense policy. It's a sad truth that the European Union is spending way more money in its finance and defense capabilities than Russia, for example. So again, we need a more integrated, better Europe, more Europe, not only in health, but also in defense. And that's what we hope to see.
And Caroline, European security is something that our young viewers are interested in as well. You have a question on this topic. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Stefan. So indeed, the war in Ukraine has been looming over Europe and over the French elections. And in this context, many of our users are wondering about the future of defense and security in Europe. Nicola from Romania has this question for our guests.
Hey, now that the elections are over, do you think it's more likely that we'll have a European army? Thank you.
All right, European army, Witold, your thoughts on this?
We do have a European army, which is called NATO. 21 countries of European Union belong to NATO. So stop this schizophrenic search for something which is separate, decoupled from NATO and from the United States. recent conflict originated by Russia is giving us the answer that only NATO is able to protect us, and the United States is willing, able, and fast answering us. Let me show you the example. A few days after the war started, Americans sent to Poland 5,000 troops from Fort Bragg with Patriot missiles and other equipment. At the same time, Joseph Borrell, according to Macron, issued the document which is called Strategic Compass. According to this document, Europe will create, in 8 years from now, 5,000 troops to defend what? Mali? But definitely not Poland.
There are other issues I want to bring in here because they're very important as well. And a lot has been said during the election campaign about independence and sovereignty on both sides, not only in France, but also in Europe, partly because of the war in Ukraine. This is particularly important when it comes to energy and climate policy. Caroline, this also sparked a lot of interest among young viewers. What is their concern? You have another question for us on this.
Thank you, Stefan. So the war in Ukraine has revealed Europe's dependence on energy imports from Russia and from other foreign sources. This is something that our Debating Europe readers are very concerned about, also in the context of climate change. And we received this question from our user Kostyan.
Hi, I'm Kostyan. Europe is now in the midst of a severe energy crisis where prices are also increasing. France is ramping up its nuclear power as Germany is closing down their nuclear power plants. Does this show that there is not a unified approach between two of the most important union countries when we talk about energy policies, and does that affect the EU Green Deal and the fight against climate change overall? Thank you.
So the question is, does the energy crisis will affect the agenda of the European Union? And Veronique, I want your take on this. Is the Green Deal in danger because we need to act here following the war in Ukraine?
Of course, the Green Deal is not in danger, but the war has changed the things in a way that could accelerate the ecological transition, providing we find the balance between the energetic problem, the ecological ambition, protecting our industries, our agricultures, and protecting the health of the citizens. So this is a difficult balance to find, but somehow the sanctions, these sanctions that at least the Rassemblement National, the far-right part in France, did not vote for. These sanctions could help to accelerate our ecological ambition, because we realize what Emmanuel Macron has been saying for years, that we are tragically dependent from Eastern Europe for energy, as we are for business towards the China and for research towards the US. So this is really an opportunity for us to bring more Europe, and as you said, and to be more united, because we are different. We are also different towards the energy we use and need. But to me, it could be a very strong opportunity, and Emmanuel Macron will, of course, take the chance of this opportunity as the President of the Council and as the President of...
Yeah, I want to go to Dilara here, because France and Germany have different perspectives when it comes to energy. More nuclear power here, more Russian gas there. That's a different situation. How do you see these things going forward?
I mean, what we have seen in Germany, also with the new government come in place, is that the focus of Germany has become independent from any kind of fossil fuel and nuclear power. And this is the way we are taking as Germans. I always regret that France, with all the possibilities you have in the south of France, with the sun on the maritime areas, that you don't use this potential for renewable energies, because it's huge and it's the most independent we can get as Europeans. So I think this can be a boost for the European Green Deal, that we saw how valuable this dependence on fossil fuels and also nuclear uranium. 1/5 of the uranium imports in Europe are coming from Russia. So we also have a dependence when it comes to uranium, when it comes to nuclear power. So the real independence lies with the renewables, and this is where the German government is putting focus on. And I think we can also have the Green Deal being a good way of how we can also accelerate investments in renewables all over Europe.
Marco, your take here, the Green Deal being threatened, good or bad?
No, because the fact is that we are speaking about dependency, the one we have from the energy sources from Russia, of course, which has been a big mistake. But we have also another dependency, the one from China, that a Green Deal imposed in a certain way will increase more and more, and that will affect socially our society. Because in absence of an alternative which could provide the same amount of energy that we need for our production to move or to have our trade with the rest of the world, in absence of that, we would have more costs, and so as a consequence, less competitivity for our enterprises. It will be more complicated to invest in Europe, and the world is not made only by the European Union member states, and so the sources from Russia will go elsewhere. Africa will be a big problem, not only for energy, but also for agriculture, for what was provided also from Ukraine. We have seen this very, very clearly. And also I think that the United States will have also to consider this, because of course now we are going to take LNG gas from the US, from ships and from Genoa. I know very well how does it work, but the cost will increase, and the quantity for which we are, obliged to buy for the coming years are big and big. So I think that the European Commission should not change the aim or the results, but the dates and the way we should reach this carbon zero emission moment, because if we, as the Rightist Party, in the past did not understand very well, was to approve and to share the same objective. Now we share the same objectives, but we say, okay, but let's keep an eye on the social consequences of the ways to reach that.
I want to have Petros's point of view here on this. You've nodded several times.
Well, it's great to hear that the right wing, the extreme right, the far right wing, is not a climate denier anymore, climate change denier. But we do have to understand the urgency of the issue of the climate crisis and how fast we need to go. Having said that, we need to be extremely careful, because I think it will also be very just to say that Macron's careless policy towards the carbon tax earned him he was maybe the father of the yellow vests. And if we're not very careful on having this transition made fast but just for everybody, the next yellow vest will neither be yellow, neither there will be vest. There will be black shirts or brown shirts. So we have to be very careful to protect our social cohesion, not only our companies, but our citizens, and to protect democratic resilience. At this moment, we're living in the midst of a fossil fuel crisis, price crisis, and we're experiencing, and going back to the deregulation of the markets and the privatization, we're now at the point where our governments cannot effectively intervene in the markets, and our citizens are experiencing hikes in the energy prices upwards of 300%. And there is not much we can really do as governments. So we have to recognize a market failure when we see that, and change our mindset towards a more socialist approach towards the just climate transition.
Can I
and
also,
be told, yeah.
Can I also add to this, because I'm opposite to my French colleague, I would like to say that I hope that this Green Deal, which was invented by this Commission, especially by Mr. Timmermans, will be revised. Not because I disagree with the situation of our climate, I also would like to protect the climate, but I think that this Green Deal was calculated upon the ideological assumptions, not the economic calculation. And this is the problem. We cannot return our economies and our life. We cannot come back to live on trees. We are one of the smallest continents, as my colleague just mentioned. The others will not follow our example. So we have to keep our economy working. We have to keep the balance, and we have to keep the balance among other continents. Otherwise, if we go in the ideological directive, we'll lose the competition with the others, and the others will absolutely not follow our example.
All right, now summing this all up here, what does it mean for Europe? Where is Europe headed right now? And taking also into account the cost of living crisis, prices increasing of raw materials, of food, of energy, we've discussed that. What is the, what can we do here? And should Europe act as a whole, or are these things better solved and dealt with on national levels? I want very, very quick answers here. Cost of living crisis, how can we attack that? Veronique.
Well, the cost of living crisis is a European topic, but it's also a national topic. From the European Union, what we can do is help the countries solve the problem. How? By making more Europe, by drawing the lessons from the sanitary crisis, where we have shown absolutely that we are stronger together and that we can regain independence by doing all together in unity.
Okay, Vito.
Well, we should do it together. All these problems we are just mentioned, we should try to solve together. But together means to get away from ideological battles. And this is the problem. When we come back to the reasonable arguments, economic calculation, and stay away from ideological battles and crusades, we can find a solution. So get rid of ideology, come back to normal business-like approach.
Dilara.
It's very interesting to come with the argumentation of ideology when you're not accepting the vast majority of science, which is based what the Green Deal is based on. So this is what we have to talk about. We have to talk about the facts, about the fact that the majority of economy and industries in Europe also demand Europe to act, to give guidelines, to give a so-called level playing field in organizing the transition. Because it is lying to people's faces that the fossil fuel-based model we are having now in Europe has a future, because it has not a future. It is lying to people if you don't organize the alternatives yet. And this is what we need to organize as Europeans, that the sustainable alternatives are available and affordable for everyone.
And this is ideology.
This is science. This is not ideology. I'm afraid that you are following a fossil ideology, which will be proven catastrophic for our people. And it's been happening all around us. And actually, I think that to answer the question of the cost of living, the cost of living crisis is a result of leaving everything to the invisible hand of the market, which has brought us here and is not going to show up now and pick up the tab. So we need more regulation. We need to have market actions from the governments. We need to take care of our people, both in terms of cost of living, also in terms of civil protection in the upcoming ideological disasters that we're going to be facing, and in terms of social cohesion.
And Marco, your conclusion.
Yes, but what my colleague told about this invisible hand, it was the politics of the European Commission, and the European Commission has suspended the rules of austerity, so-called, only provisionally because of the pandemic. And in their views, these rules that have created a situation for which the European Union was the part of the world who grew less in the last 20 years in comparison with the rest of the world. These rules should come back in the 1st January next year. So I think that the debate, in order to delay forever this kind of rules, which did not create development, did not create investments, did not create safe jobs in Europe, should really start and not only announced in some statements. And I hope that the French government, every government in EU, should collaborate on this.
All right, that does it for us today. Thanks to all our participants for a spirited and interesting debate. Thanks to Caroline Will and our partner Debating Europe. Thanks to the European Parliament for hosting us, and thanks to all viewers for tuning in. I'm Stefan Grobe. You're watching Euronews. Stay with us.